Welcome to Nitte, a place where learning goes way beyond the classroom. For some, it's home. For some, it's a step towards transformation. For some, it's the beginning of a wonderful journey with like-minded people.
Thanks to the teaching and mentoring activities and Dynamic Incubation Center, I am now industry ready.
Engineering at Nitte includes aeronautical, civil, computer science, electrical and electronics, electronics and communication, information science, mechanical, biotechnology, MTech, MCA and PhD. Nitte also collaborates with reputed universities around the world to give students an international academic exposure.
At Nitte, the focus on research has not only helped me understand my subjects, but reach for the stars.
Nitte offers a unique co-op program and exposure to architects, artisans and urban designers.
I aspire to be the heart of progress.
CHEMA is listed in the World Directory of Medical Schools.
I learned the art of helping people smile.
A.B. Shetty Dental College is listed as one of the top dental colleges in the country. Justice K.S. Hegde Charitable Hospital, part of the Nitte Group, has 1,000 beds, advanced labs and diagnostic centers, which attract a good number of patients from across South India. Along with teaching and clinical practices, we offer programs in pharmacy, nursing, physiotherapy, speech and hearing, biomedical sciences, and paramedical programs like respiratory therapy technology, operation theatre technology, medical imaging technology, and medical laboratory technology.
I've always been curious about the chemistry of cures. I help in healing. From toddlers to seniors, I care for them all.
I believe I can help improve the quality of other people's lives.
We are blessed with the ability to speak and hear from birth. Not everyone is as lucky. I want to do my bit to help the less fortunate. I am proud to be able to assist a surgeon in the operation theatre.
From simple X-rays to sophisticated MRI and PET scans,
my course trains me to assist radiologists and physicians. The training I have received in testing blood, tissues and body fluids assures me a job at any clinical laboratory. I help people enjoy every breath.
I believe in the power of research to change the world.
NU-TEC is a one-of-its-kind teaching and research center that addresses society's health needs through painstaking research in biomedical sciences, food safety, microbiology, and biotechnology.
What I learn here and at my internship in the University of Minnesota, USA, I will carry with me and teach my community to live healthy and stay happy. We believe in being our own bosses.
The Bloomberg Lab helps students stay up to date with the latest trends in global markets. Students also have access to Bloomberg Analytics and can, in the course of their learning, develop their own analytics.
I cook my own recipe for success.
Sarosh Institute of Hotel Administration molds each student to become perfect hospitality professionals. A healthy blend of polish and panache.
I speak for the voiceless. This is what I'm taught, and this is what I'll practice.
I design my dreams and my goals.
I measure success by the trends I inspire.
Bachelors in Fashion Technology at Nitte offer students state-of-the-art labs and the space to get their creative juices flowing. With the best of infrastructure, an active placement cell, and a lively atmosphere, education at Nitte helps students grow, breathe, and bloom. Graduate into a better future. Graduate with Nitte. Welcome to Nitte, a place where learning goes way beyond the classroom. For some, it's home. For some, it's a step towards transformation. For some, it's the beginning of a wonderful journey with like-minded people.
Thanks to the teaching and mentoring activities and dynamic incubation center, I am now industry ready.
Engineering at Nitte includes aeronautical, civil, computer science, electrical and electronics, electronics and communication.
A very good afternoon to one and all. Good morning for those from other continents, and good evening for those who are, I should say, much ahead of us. And in the true Indian style, I think COVID times are best when you start any event with a namaste. And our own guest, Professor Alan Riley, is very associated with India for the last close to half a century. And therefore, he is very familiar with the Namaste greeting from India, which suits all seasons, all people, all times. With this, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who has registered for this very exciting event, the World Food Safety Day. The World Health Organization had only as late as 2018 deliberated on having a day where there would be a lot of information disseminated with regard to safety aspects of food. And it was decided that June 7th would be observed as the World Food Safety Day. And the first time that it got to be celebrated was in 2019. So here we are celebrating it in a very, very, I should say, exciting manner. COVID times has kept us all indoors, in lockdown. All parts of the world are going through the catastrophe. But we are also very aware that nothing can hold a community, the human community, from surging forward with whatever one has to do to win over any catastrophe, and the COVID pandemic is no exception to it. The World Food Safety Day indeed has the theme, as is mentioned in the advertising mode, safe food today for a healthy tomorrow. Realizing very well that the safety of food is paramount to food security, and with food security comes livelihood, the development of an ideal economy. One would want to take care of what we eat. There is an adage, we are what we eat. In saying so, it has been exemplified in the science of Ayurveda through the types of food that one eats, and foods have generally been classified as sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. But sattvic food is the one that, of course, gives you a lot of energy, but the kind of food that is not processed, cooked and eaten within 3 to 4 hours. Added to it, this food is something that keeps the mind calm, also keeps people away from illnesses. A lot of raw foods also come under this category, but we also know that many of the foods like legumes, the quality of water is very important, and therefore food and water generally go together. As an example, we have honey, we have refined sugar, we have chocolates. Honey or the jaggery would come under the category of, say, sattvic food, while when it is processed and becomes a chocolate, then it becomes rajasic, almost something like a king would eat. But we know all the illnesses also that come about when they have that, but care can be taken when taken in moderate quantities. And then you have the refined sugar that becomes another cause for even sometimes illnesses such as diabetes. And therefore, what is said in some of our ancient scriptures is not without reason. And therefore, it augurs well for us to today look at what happens when food which is harvested goes through various stages, from farm to the fork, as they say, or from farm to the table. It has to be processed, cooked, processed, and then preserved many times, because we know everything is not available all the time, and there is such a lot of exchange of food globally that is going on. And in all of this, The consumer is the most important, and we need to remember that during, of course, this kind of food exports, imports that go on, safety is paramount, not only for the domestic purposes, but for international purposes as well. India is a signatory to many of the treaties with regard to food, and therefore it becomes paramount that we take care that food safety reigns very high. In fact, I was very happy that our guest speaker for the day, Professor Alan Riley, about whom you will hear a little later, wanted to know where India stands, and I was very happy to tell him that India has a food standards and safety and standards authority, and this body called the FSSAI takes care a lot of setting standards and of course involved with the scientific panels and committees are scientists, elegant scientists from the country who have contributed, and therefore many who are also familiar with Professor Alan Riley are online today to listen to him. I would now like to introduce and present before everyone our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Satish Kumar Bhandari. We are a health university, and therefore having a person who has qualifications in the area of health sciences, a healthy person with a healthy mind and a healthy body is what you need, and it is only in the fitness of things that he holds the highest rank. But it's also very good to have people going through all of the junior ranks before they reach where they are. An otorhinolaryngologist by profession, he with his basic medical degree from Mysore Medical College, one of the very famous medical colleges in the country, government college, he moved to do his post-graduation and specialize in ENT, as we say, and in a city called Davangere. And after finishing that, returned to his home district to join a prestigious medical college, the Kasturba Medical College, where he served as assistant and associate professor. After close to a decade of experience there, he joined the Nitte deemed to be university, about which he will tell, because it will be, I'm sure, his pride to present before everyone our university, the genesis and where we are. When he joined Nitte University, he rose through the ranks of being a professor to become the Vice Dean and Dean of the Medical College, named in short Kshema. Kshema also means well-being, but it is an acronym for K.S. Hegde Medical Academy. And there was no looking back after that. He then became the Vice Chancellor and has been very ably leading the university. The fact that he's here today to let us all have some of the best speakers in our webinars, globally acclaimed people who through their experience let us enrich ourselves and those who have been associated with this country in order to also see how the progress has been made in the last few years, speaks volumes of his own, I should say, interest in taking the university forward. I'm also happy to state that he himself is very interested in research. Of course, being an administrator, he cannot devote so much time, but what he can do at this point of time is encourage others, and that's what we're all meant to do whenever we occupy positions where, as an administrator, your interest is shown in the way you participate in research briefly, but you also encourage a lot of others through value addition, giving ideas, making it feasible for people to do whatever they want to achieve through their ideas. And this is exemplified by his involvement with what many people may not be familiar with in the advertising brochure, the Technology Enabling Center that has been set up by the Department of Science and Technology, where it is the hand-holding of researchers to develop technologies. And our own DST Technology Enabling Center is to focus on medical technologies, Meditech as we call, and food tech. And therefore, having today this day celebration where challenges during this COVID times will be presented, because challenges become the first step for ideas to overcome challenges. And therefore, without taking more time, I would say thank you all those who have registered, because you know you will stay enriched at the end of the day. And now I would request our Vice Chancellor, Professor Satish Kumar Bhandari, to now offer his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon and good morning to Alan. Thank you, Indrani, for the good introduction which you have given. Very distinguished speaker for the day, Dr. Alan Riley, the advisor for WHO, former CEO of Food Safety Authority of Ireland, Dr. Idya Karunasagar and Indrani Karunasagar, and all my colleagues from Nitte deemed to be University. Greetings from Nitte deemed to be University to all the participants in this very unique webinar on the eve of World Food Safety Day. I congratulate the DST TEC, our very prestigious institution of the university, for organizing this oration by Dr. Alan. Thank you, Alan, for accepting our invitation to participate in this webinar. As you all know, India has made very rapid progress in food production, thanks to the programs like we had Green Revolution, then White Revolution. Now we are going through a Blue Revolution. I think India has become self-sufficient in food grains and milk, and we are exporting more than $6 billion worth of fisheries products, seafood, to the particularly countries like US and Europe. And while food production is very important for food and nutrition security, we should also see that we should ensure that the food is safe and and it should be healthy for consumption. India has got that very unusual spectrum of both malnutrition and obesity. We have got morbid, it has been estimated that more than 5% of the population is suffering from morbid obesity, when our 34% of the children are having stunted growth. This is very, very paradox. And unless we address this issue as far as the food is concerned, we are going to end up with the catastrophic our lifestyle diseases. Already India has become capital of diabetes in the world. I think this is very appropriate that we are celebrating World Food Safety Day by inviting people like Alan to address our community here. According to WHO, 1 out of 10 individuals are affected by foodborne illnesses globally. To highlight the importance of food safety, United Nations has declared this particular day appropriately as World Food Safety Day. The theme, as Indrani said, save food now for a healthy tomorrow. As Indrani said, in our Ayurveda, and there's a saying in Kannada, the person who knows how to eat will be healthy. Uta ballavaniga rogavilla. That's what we tell in our local language, our state language. We need to keep very vigile so that there is no shortcoming anywhere, and very important to see that we follow all the guidelines from the production till transportation and till we serve at home or in the kitchen when we prepare the food. All these aspects should be taken care. In India, we got another huge responsibility of providing food, particularly during we have a lot of big festivals and we celebrate a lot of during large gathering we serve food, and in the university we got a central kitchen serving food for more than 2,000 to 2,500 students per day. and we take care. I think our people are doing very well regarding providing very nutritious, very healthy food for our students who are staying in the campus. As you all know, we are going through an unprecedented global health crisis due to COVID-19. This year, on this very important day, the global food safety watchdogs are highlighting the risks associated with harmful eating practices. In the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is believed to have begun, I think, as you all know, it started spreading among humans 2 years back from wet market in China. And I think a lot of debate is happening, how it originated and all that. I'll not to dwell into that. On this particular day, it must be mentioned that while there is there's no evidence to suggest that there is transmission of COVID-19 through food, but the experts have suggested that you have to follow some food safety etiquette to prevent spread of COVID through fomites, including washing your hands with soap and water for more than 20 seconds before preparing and after eating food, and keep strict check on the possibility of contamination of food products during storage and packaging. I congratulate once again DST TEC for organizing this webinar. I hope the talk by very distinguished speaker, Dr. Allen, will be rewarding, and all of you will carry very pleasant memories after his talk on particularly the theme, which is very, very relevant, food and the safety for tomorrow and for our health. Thank you very much. Over to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Realizing that unsafe food kills over 4,20,000 people per year, it is only appropriate that in the context of One Health, where we know it's not just the human health, but the animal, plant, environment, health as a whole has to be thought of and taken care of. And in this context, it is, we as microbiologists look to be, of course, microorganisms that cannot be seen by the naked eye, but that can bring about infections or intoxications, whether water is involved or the organism through the food is involved, whether it is pre-processing during harvest or after processing, whether an individual would come in also in spreading contamination. All of this and more, of course, is important in the context of food safety. And therefore, against the background of One Health, it is very appropriate that we have from the World Health Organization an advisor and also someone who has been with food safety for over 4 decades. Our own, I should say, close association with him will be in detail described by Karuna Sagar, Dr. Karuna Sagar. We have, yes, written a book together. We have been extremely close in relation to research, and I can tell the audience today that the first PCR project in the country came from funding which Dr. Alan Riley gave. We were the first lab soon after the discovery of the polymerase chain reaction when Nobel Prize was given, when telephonically a project was given to us, and that funding enabled us to start PCR even when medical institutions and no other institutions were ready to take on. And it is historical to remember today that because we today are recognized in such fields of molecular biology, but the beginnings were made through the confidence that Alan had in us to give us a project to work on. Thank you, Alan. It's an appropriate forum to tell that as well. And our first publications together speak of that. Over to Karuna Sagar, and you will all have the pleasure of hearing about Alan. And good things always have to wait a little before they come to you. So Alan's talk will be after the introduction by Karuna Sagar.
Okay, thank you. It's indeed a great honor and privilege for me to introduce Professor Alan Riley, whom we have known for over 4 decades. And our early interaction with him was when he used to come to Asia as a member of the FAO expert team working on shrimp safety. At that time, there was a question whether pathogens like Salmonella and Vibrio cholerae can be transmitted through shrimp. And a big project was initiated by FAO. And that time, Alan came several times to Asia, and he was working also in Asia. You can see some of his early papers on Vibrio cholerae in shrimp, some work which he did in Thailand and then in Philippines. So we have been interacting since then. He was at the Natural Resources Institute, which was later associated with the University of Greenwich in UK. And he also spent some time in the Philippines in a university. So he was very active in academics at that time. And then he moved back to Natural Resources Institute, and he was heading the microbiology group there. And he, as Indrani mentioned, was also funding various research projects in different parts of the world as the Overseas Development Agency grants. And then he moved to the WHO as the head of the food safety group there. So in WHO, he initiated a number of new programs when he was there, and also wrote a number of joint FAO-WHO books. And one of the early books that he edited as a WHO book was on strengthening food control authority. So today he'll be talking a little bit on that. And then he came back to Ireland, and he was involved in setting up the the Food Safety Authority of Ireland. And eventually he was chosen as the CEO of this Food Safety Authority of Ireland, and he led this very ably. And as Ireland is part of the European Union, so he had to interact very closely with all the member countries. So he had to interact very closely with Brussels, and so he took science to the field in this position. So implementing the risk assessments and risk-based food safety management. So he introduced a number of new programs in the EU. And he, after his retirement from the Food Safety Authority of Ireland, he was with FAO for 3 years in Bangladesh as the Chief Technical Advisor, and he helped Bangladesh set up the Bangladesh Food Safety Authority and also start some courses in food safety. And now he works with various international organizations as consultant. And right now he is working full time with WHO because he's helping them develop the World Food Safety Strategy for WHO. And he is also a member of the advisory board of InfoSan. InfoSan is a joint FAO-WHO network of food safety authorities. So this is an agency which is involved in collecting information about foodborne outbreaks globally and using this information for developing risk-based management strategies at global level. So we are indeed very fortunate to have Professor Riley. Of course, in addition to his work with the governments, with international organizations, he is still interested academically. So when I was talking to him the other day, he said he still interacts with students in University of Dublin. So he holds a position of adjunct professor there. So he keeps his academic interest still, though in spite of his busy schedule consulting various international organizations. So we are indeed very fortunate to have you, Alan, this afternoon, of course, the afternoon here and morning for you there, to give this oration on strengthening National Food Control Authority. Over to you, Alan.
Well, thank you very much, Karen, for those warm words. And I'm beginning to think I'm very old after all of that. Let me say how honoured I am to be here, Vice Chancellor, to be invited to give this talk today on food safety, something very close to my heart. And as you've learned, both Indrani and Karen are personal friends going back many, many years. Let me try and share my screen now with you. Can you see that screen okay?
Yeah, we can see, yes.
You can see it, great.
Yes.
Well, look, I want to talk today about national food safety systems and really the challenges that are posed to the national food safety systems by the COVID pandemic. I'll talk about essentially some of the issues associated with national food safety systems, food control systems, and I will talk about how the COVID pandemic are impacting or is impacting on both the private sector, the government sector, and wider the food industry, and then what we can do about it. To try and come up with some solutions and to look forward into the future. If we look at food safety and the drivers of food safety, when I talk about the drivers, these are factors that actually impact on the food chain, factors causing change, affecting and shaping the future of food safety. We've heard from Indrani about the importance of protecting consumer health, and certainly if you look at a key driver is the protection of consumer health. Governments really must invest in food safety to ensure the health of consumers is protected. And if you look at some of the data from WHO, yes, we have over 600 million people sick annually, with 420,000 deaths in 2019. The actual cost of foodborne illness is in the region of about 110 billion US dollars. This is what it costs the world globally. So investing in protecting consumers' health is key when it comes to actions taken by government. Global food trade, the last thing you want to see is shipments of food products being rejected in overseas markets. So really, unless governments, unless countries have effective systems in place to manage food safety, you will fail on the global food market. In terms of climate change, we're looking at intensive agricultural production as a major contributor to greenhouse gases. And this is something that we are going to have to come to grips with in the future, and that's the cost of intensive agriculture to the environment. At the present moment, the environment is not accounted for in food systems, and certainly if we are to survive into the future, it is key that we factor in the cost in terms of waste, greenhouse gases, into the overall cost of intensive agricultural systems. Climate change, is also affecting things like quality of produce. We're looking at reduced nutrient content of various crops due to things like drought, increased temperatures. Globally, we're looking at increases in things like mercury content because of the changes in the Arctic ice caps. As these melt, they're releasing more and more chemicals into the environment, and certainly mercury is one that will affect the aquatic food web. Population growth and urbanization. Let me say, at the present moment, we have nearly half of the world's population living in the urban environment. There are huge challenges there with respect to food safety, getting safe food from the point of production into the urban environment. We're seeing a greater increase in the numbers of elderly people who are more susceptible to foodborne illness. All of these factors, are driving the need to invest in food safety and food control systems. We're seeing shifts in consumer preferences, people wanting to eat things like organic food, minimal processed foods. These are considered more healthy. In Europe, we've seen over the last few years a major increase in hepatitis A illness associated with frozen berries. These are raw frozen berries that are used in the production of things like smoothies, which are perceived as a healthy food, essentially berries being contaminated with hepatitis A in the field, contributing to major outbreaks of hepatitis A in the European Union. New digital and new technology systems. We're seeing new trends in food production. For instance, things like single-cell meat is something that's coming down the track. We're now seeing fishery products and meat like chicken being produced in fermenters in laboratories. What are the food safety implications of those new foods? We don't really know. We're seeing new systems for producing crops, things like gene editing. What is the food safety implications of gene editing, where we have the potential to essentially make new plants, create new animals that are disease resistant, resistant to drought, can produce new micronutrients. All of these factors are really driving the interest in food safety. When we look at national food control systems and the key components of national food control systems, essentially governments have to have food safety policy in place. If a government hasn't articulated its desire or wishes in the area of food safety into a published policy, really that's not a very good foundation to build your national food control system on. We need a framework legislation. These are food regulations and food standards, all key. And I will acknowledge that India has made huge progress in the area of policy and legislation with the establishment of your food safety and standards agency. Key to success of a food control system is some form of coordinated operational management right across the whole of the food chain from farm to fork. One of the real challenges with food safety is, it's the responsibility of many different government agencies. It's the responsibility of health. It's the responsibility of agriculture. Trade will have a say in food safety. You've got many different central government departments or ministries. You've got local, regional governments, and so on. Somehow you have to coordinate the operational management of all of these different players to ensure an effective food control system. And that has to be written into regulation. That has to be articulated in your overall food safety policy, some mechanism to make sure that there's an effective coordination and cooperation between all those national agencies. Otherwise, for sure, you're going to fail. Risk-based food inspection is really key. There's so many different food premises out there that you cannot inspect them all. And really, you need to have some form of risk ranking of food premises to proportion the type of inspection you're going to carry out. You want to inspect the high-risk premises, and those low-risk premises you inspect less frequently. And of course, import and export food control systems, are key, certainly for countries like India, who are importing and exporting large quantities of foods. To have any type of confidence with, trading partners, if you don't have an effective, transparent food control system in place, you're not going to be successful on the global market. Monitoring and surveillance is really key, and certainly it's essential to generate data and information on which you can conduct risk assessment. And this is where a lot of countries don't really have the wherewithal they don't have the resources to conduct monitoring and surveillance to a level where they can use such information to underpin the risk management decisions they take. So risk assessment certainly should be the basis for all decisions, for instance, on enforcement, whether you close premises, take foods off the market, and so on. So without an effective monitoring and surveillance system in place at national level, it's going to be very difficult to conduct food control. And finally, training and education is really key, and for the food control authorities or competent authorities to engage and communicate with all stakeholders. We could talk forever about the need for training to educate consumers about how they can protect themselves, and certainly on the occasion of World Food Day or Food Safety Day, education is really key to get the message out to consumers about how they can protect themselves and their family by essentially putting food hygiene and sanitation in place in the kitchen. So those are all the various components of a food control system. The WHO and FAO are in the process of preparing new strategies for food safety. The WHO's Global Food Safety Strategy for 2022 to 2030 is currently out for public consultation, and the link at the bottom of this slide is where you can access that strategy if you wish to comment on it or just see how it has been developed. And the FAO is also developing a new food safety strategy, and a link to their plans is at the second link. I will make this presentation available so that you can have access to those two links. But really the importance of all of this is that food safety certainly is a public health issue, and it's a food trade issue, and both of these leading organizations are in the process of upgrading their strategies for the next 7 to 10 years. If we look at the COVID pandemic and how it has impacted on our food systems, one of the major issues at the beginning of the crisis was the closure of food processing plants. And we had closures of food processing plants all over the world. Some of these headlines from Germany, we had 1,500 workers tested positive for COVID-19 at a meat processing plant, and that meat processing plant had to close. You had a cannery in Ghana closing. In the US, you had the seafood processing plants closing. Here in Ireland, we had clusters in meat processing plants, which led to closures. And that picture has been the same all over the world. So that was one of the major impacts of COVID-19 on the food chain. Now, when these plants were closing, we really didn't know what was happening. when I say we needed to generate data, we needed the science to help us make decisions as to what to do in these cases. But the plants closed, people were sick. That's how they were getting sick and so on. Really, we didn't know at the time, but we had real suspicions. When you look at global food trade, has also been disrupted. These are some headlines from the Chinese press where China suspended imports, and they were blaming some of the imports of frozen foods for transmission of COVID to food workers. In Bangkok recently, a large shrimp market was closed, and there that was associated with people getting sick. Dissemination or increase, multiplication of cases. So really the center for the outbreak would have been the shrimp market. So that's also if you like to call it a trend, that global food trade has been disrupted. We've seen lockdowns, we've seen things like the catering industry, restaurants, cafes closing. So this has had a major disruption to the actual supply of food. Food producers have had to find new markets. So all of these things have come at us out of the blue. And to be quite honest, I don't think we were very well prepared to deal with this type of pandemic. If we look at the impact of COVID-19 on the food sector, well, just to start, the figures at the top of this slide, on the 4th of June, the WHO, they update numbers and so on. They have a dedicated web page where they continuously update the impact of the pandemic on the global population. But we had 171 billion cases of COVID-19, and we had 3.6 million deaths. This was the 4th of June when I looked at that database. So this has had a major impact. If you look at things like the tourism industry, I don't know the value of the tourism industry to India, but I'm sure it's quite a large part of your GDP, and your tourism has just stopped. In Ireland, we rely on tourists, and our tourism industry has vanished. And that is about 3% of GDP. So you can think of all the jobs that are associated with tourism, the hotels, restaurants, and so on, all of those people out of work. So this has had an enormous impact on the economics of global trade. And some countries are suffering more than others. But the key issue here about the impact, on the food sector, that there's no evidence that the virus is transmitted via food. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know to what degree, but really that is a statement, and the epidemiological evidence over the past 18 months to 2 years would support the fact that food is not involved in transmission of the illness. You don't get respiratory. This is a respiratory illness, COVID-19, and respiratory illnesses are not transmitted by food or food packaging. The human-to-human transmission is via respiratory droplets or aerosols. Certainly, aerosols have come more to the fore in recent months through coughing and so on. So that's a general, if you like to call it, overview of the impact on the food sector. When you look at the possible sources of SARS-CoV-2 exposure in food processing environments, and as I was saying, food processing plants, closed down at the beginning of this pandemic. If you look at how it spread in food processing environments, if you have an individual who has the illness, and they cough or sneeze, certainly droplets, respiratory droplets will carry the virus, and a person close in close proximity to an individual who's coughing or sneezing is very much at risk of catching the disease. So respiratory droplets, but then you have number 2 here is aerosols. And this has really only been demonstrated in the, conclusively in the last few months that aerosols also spread this illness. So this is much more serious because aerosols can remain suspended in the air for some periods of time, and they can also travel, quite a distance from the individual who's produced the aerosols. Condensation here, number 3, where you have those aerosols condensing on cold surfaces. They fall down onto let's say food processing surfaces, onto things like conveyor belts, chopping boards, and so on. Once they're there, they can splash to actually spread the virus further. And food handlers, from hand to mouth, direct contact. So those are all the different ways in a food processing environment that this illness can be spread. And really key to, if we have done a lot of work in Ireland in meat processing plants, where you have a large number of workers working in close proximity to one another. And over an 8-hour shift, you can see the build-up of these aerosols, these micro particles in the air. Where you have things like cold temperatures in meat processing plants, these are areas where the virus can actually be spread, and it was one of the reasons why you saw so many meat plants closing down, because of the poor ventilation within those meat plants. And we didn't know at the time that these viruses were building up in the air through aerosol generation. When you look at the risk of transmitting the virus in working environment, the mitigation, the control factors, food workers need to be aware of the symptoms of COVID. They need to report those symptoms in very quickly to management. And workforce testing. We've seen more and more companies now using these lateral flow tests for checking workers on their way into food premises. Staff illness reporting is really key, and an exclusion from the work environment once you do find somebody with the illness. Physical distancing is important, 1 to 2 meters. It's not always possible in food processing plants. Certainly on things like meat production lines and so on, you will get workers working closely together. The use of personal protective equipment is really key. And working in pods, groups of workers working together, in isolation from others within a factory, is one way of controlling the spread of the illness in a food processing environment. Hand washing and sanitizing, especially those high touch hands, doorknobs, don't ask me, there are many different high touch points within a food processing environment. These should be cleaned on a regular basis. And probably the most important is air conditioning, air exchange, and good ventilation. And a lot of food processing environments now have introduced HEPA filters into their air conditioning and air exchange systems to capture particles down to about 0.3 microns. So anybody wanting to have more information on guidance for food businesses, the World Health Organization and the Food and Agricultural Organization have published this guidance. This guidance has been updated, fairly recently, but it can be found at this link. If we look at challenges for competent authorities, and the competent authorities would be like the Indian Food Safety and Standards Authority, and the challenges posed for those competent authorities. Working as usual is not an option. I mean, many people within the food authorities are now working from home. But you need to identify and prioritize critical areas for work. Essentially, you need some form of contingency planning, a food safety emergency response plan, where you do identify in your plan those critical areas where you cannot afford to stop those activities. And the challenges really for the competent authorities are brought about by reduced staff resources due to reallocation of staff. These would be all government employees working in food safety authorities, and they would be taking off those duties and allocated to more pressing government functions associated with the COVID pandemic. This can lead to things like a reduction in the numbers of inspections in food premises. It can also lead to a reduction in sampling and analysis of foods, as the food laboratories have had to move over to PCR testing for COVID cases. And this, of course, leads to an increased risk to the integrity of the food supply chain from food fraud. And that's something that really has come to the fore since the beginning of the pandemic. For food safety authorities or competent authorities, it really is key that they are there to provide accurate and credible information. And this would be for both the food industry and for the public. There is such a lot of misinformation associated with COVID-19 that really consumers deserve a credible source of information, and really it's setting up something like a dedicated website or a web page which you update regularly associated with COVID-19. Very important to liaise with industry and keep the industry updated on regulatory issues, and we have seen a number of new regulations associated with the pandemic coming into force. And consumer information, really is not the responsibility of just one agency, but really a multi-agency responsibility. Public health and food safety agencies should work together to produce that information. And that is a challenge in itself, because there are still disagreements about the best way forward. But really, it's beholden to the government agencies to provide that type of credible information and accurate information for consumers and for the food industry. And again, anyone interested in looking at the broader guidance for the food control authorities, this can be found at this website, published by the FAO and WHO have come together to produce that guidance for competent authorities. The third area is for traditional food markets, and your Vice Chancellor did mention about the earliest cases of COVID-19 had been linked to a wholesale market in China, and store owners, market employees, and members of the public were all, in the first cases, of this illness. How it started there is still a matter for discussion. But when you look at traditional food markets, they're an important source of livelihood for millions of urban and rural dwellers. And really, there was calls for closing these markets down from some eminent politicians and eminent scientists. And really, that is not the way forward. Significant problems can arise in these food markets when the sale and slaughter of live wild animals or live animals is allowed, and really that's where the problem was arising, with the sale and slaughter of wild animals in the markets. And really, when you look at the risk of transmission of pathogens in traditional food market environments, the markets are thought to provide an environment conducive for animal coronavirus to amplify and transmit. So if you're slaughtering animals in areas that are close to where the public have access, you will get a build-up from all of the different excretions of the animals and blood and feathers and guts and all the rest in the environment, there'd be a high risk of transmission of any of the pathogens associated with those animals to humans. The slaughter of wild animals in areas where the public have access is a huge risk. And when you look at where most of our emerging infectious diseases come from, they have wildlife origins. Over 70% of all of the emerging zoonosis that we've seen over the last number of years have all come from wildlife. And really it's the encroachment on wildlife areas that is one of the problems. Foraging for meat and so on from slaughtering wild animals, all of these, increase the risk of transmission of such pathogens. So reducing the risk of transmission, these are some of the recommendations that were recently published by the WHO, OIE, and UNEP to suspend the trade in live caught wild animals of mammalian species for food. So really stopping this trade, prohibiting the slaughter of live wild animals in public areas of the market, and of course increasing the standards of hygiene and sanitation, crowd control, physical distancing and so on, hand washing, all would contribute to reducing the risk of transmission of zoonosis. And the guidance for food markets was published in April of this year, reducing public health risks associated with the sale of wild animals. And that is three of the agencies, the OIE, that's the World Organization for Animal Health, WHO, and the United Nations Environmental Programme have all come together to produce this interim guidance, and it can be found at this link, and that's a very recent document that's just been published. So when you look at the impacts of COVID on the in the EU in general, it's reduced the incidence of foodborne illness. Now you might think that's strange that we have lower foodborne illness because of COVID, but when you consider that we're now all washing our hands, we're physical distancing, we're paying much more attention to hygiene and sanitation, washing surfaces, the closure of restaurants and things like pubs and cafes and so on, which were in the past major centres for foodborne illness. This has all contributed to reducing the incidence of foodborne illness right across the EU. We've seen an increase in the use of online platforms by both consumers and the food industry. And this is for purchasing. So the numbers of takeaways, we've seen the rise of what we call dark kitchens, where kitchens have just sprung up to produce takeaway foods, so that instead of going out to restaurants, the restaurants come to people. And this has increased what we call online shopping, and this trend is likely to continue. So e-commerce also presents a challenge for food regulations and enforcement. It's an area where competent authorities don't have a lot of experience with respect to enforcing regulations, trying to find registered premises and so on is a huge challenge for the food authorities. And of course, we've seen an increase in risk of food crime and food fraud. When you order something online, it's not what is delivered to your door. This is a headline from Europol from the 17th of April. Counterfeiters, substandard goods, and intellectual property crime in the COVID pandemic. So you see this quote here: counterfeit goods sold during the corona crisis do not meet the required quality standards and pose a real threat to public health. So this is a reality where we're seeing an increase in this type of criminal activity since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and certainly it applies to the food chain as well as other areas of trade. I was looking at the impact of COVID-19 in India, and certainly the food market lockdown seriously disrupted Indian farms. Getting produce, and farm products from the farms into the urban centres, and with the lockdown, this has been seriously disrupted. Rising food prices is putting pressure on food security. I think there was a trend for reducing food prices in recent years, but this has been reversed due to the COVID pandemic. A lack of migrant labour has resulted in the loss of produce and irregular supplies. And I think that applies not only to India, but many parts of the world where you have migrant labour and they're not able to travel, and you're seeing crops remaining in the field. And operational challenges for retailers. Do you have this trend now in direct food marketing, and communication and logistic challenges for direct sales to consumers, pose problems. And I think a lot of people are learning by doing in this particular area. But the COVID pandemic has had serious impacts on the food chain. So what's the answer? What's the solution to all of this? And Indrani mentioned One Health, and I think a recognition now of One Health and the fact that there's an interdependence between humans, animals, food, and the environment, and we must really tackle this problem at this interface of human, animal, and environment. And unless we do, I don't think we're going to succeed. We need to have a farm to fork strategy, and this simply says we need to look at all the links in the food chain, and we need to be able to ensure effective enforcement of regulations, and the food industry needs to take the responsibility for producing safe food all along this food chain. And that is really key to protecting consumers and ensuring a safe food supply. With One Health, what's required? Well, we need to develop some form of strategic framework. And when we look at all the different components, of the food chain, we're looking at human health, we're looking at food and food safety and food standards, we're looking at animal health, and the environment. In addition, communications, education, and enforcement of regulations associated with research, legislation, data collection, and cooperation. So these are all the different areas where we need a better alignment, really, when it comes to One Health. And it's just like a Rubik Cube, that you have to get better alignment between all of these different areas. There has to be a common strategy with respect to animal health, human health, the environment, and food, and all the related areas that support these four key areas. And unless we have greater collaboration and cooperation across all those sectors, we're really not going to be in a good position, certainly to tackle the next pandemic and even to tackle this one. So a One Health approach is really key, both at national and international level. And we've set up between the FAO, OIE, and WHO, and now UNEP, the United Nations Environmental Programme, that they've set up an alliance, and it's a One Health alliance to tackle some of the real, public health problems, and to have a better response system. And this involves improving surveillance and rapid response, and surveillance, looking at things like syndromic surveillance in real time, and analyzing data from those programs to really underpin policy, consistency across all the standard setting activities, and managing risk at a human, animal, and environment interface is really key. And that was something we weren't doing with SARS-CoV-2 and some of the other recent viruses to emerge, things like Ebola, Nitte, MERS. These are all recent zoonoses that have emerged from the encroachment of mankind on the wildlife habitat. And as late as last month, a new international expert panel to address the emergence and spread of zoonotic diseases has been set up. And as I say, it involves these 4 UN agencies, and really they're developing a strategy at the present moment for a One Health approach to managing risks at a human, animal, and environment interface. So hopefully we'll be in a position to better respond to pandemics in the future. If you look at antimicrobial resistance in the food chain and having a One Health response to antimicrobial resistance, and this is really where you can have some success from a One Health program, because the One Health program is going to involve our medical colleagues, on the human side, the veterinary colleagues on the animal disease side, and also environmental colleagues when it comes to the environment and the soil and the whole of the farming system. When you look at antimicrobial resistance, and this is one of the key challenges, for now and certainly into the immediate future, is the use of antibiotics. We're overusing antibiotics in human medicine, and certainly we're overusing antibiotics in intensive agricultural production. We're getting these antimicrobial resistance pathogens into the food chain, and there's been many examples. When you don't have antibiotics to treat illnesses, people are dying from antibiotic-resistant diseases where we used to be able to treat them. And certainly that's a huge concern globally, that we are running out of antibiotics. In fact, the last new antibiotics were discovered, I think, in the 1980s. So we have had no new antibiotics for the last 40 years. And that's serious. You're also getting antimicrobial resistant strains into the environment, and certainly if you look at sewage works and so on, water supplies, you will find antimicrobial resistant E. coli and other pathogens that we simply don't have the antibiotics to treat them. So really, these pathogens are getting stronger every day, and we need a response. And the response really comes in, a One Health response. The European Union has put together an action plan, a One Health action plan to combat AMR, and others have followed suit. So really, there is examples of One Health approaches to tackling some of these serious public health problems that we're having. And I think when it comes to combating pandemics, a One Health approach is certainly key to ensuring that we're in a better position to tackle the next one and really get us out of the mess we're in with this one. Well, look, a number of key take-home messages I would like to focus on. To conclude my talk, the national food control systems are essential for protecting consumer health and facilitating trade. And unless governments invest to an adequate amount in ensuring these systems work, you're going to fail in protecting your consumers, and certainly you're not going to have a lot of success in international food trade. As we said, the Covid-19 is not a foodborne disease, or SARS-CoV-2, is not transmitted through food. Occupational health and safety measures are essential to ensuring a COVID-free processing environments, and that is for the food processing industry, it really is key to keeping the illness out of food plants. And when you do have somebody with the illness, to quickly respond and isolate that person and make sure that they get out of the food plant as quickly as possible and don't return until they are healthy. But that is really key. It's an occupational health and safety issue. It's not a food safety issue. The competent authorities require contingency plans with, effective communication with all stakeholders. That is beholding on the competent authorities to perform those key functions. The COVID pandemic, I think, it demonstrates the need to strengthen national and international responses and to adopt this One Health approach. To address the failure to predict and halt the emergence of COVID-2. And we say, looking back on 2 years or 3 years, we really did fail to predict that we were going to have this type of pandemic, and we have not been very good in halting its emergence. And we say the world is so interconnected at the present moment that we manage within probably 48 hours to spread that illness all over the world. We need improved surveillance, and we need to integrate prevention and control efforts in all sectors to reduce the emergence of zoonotic risks. So I think that is really key, that we need to adopt the One Health approach. We need to look at the human-animal environmental interface. And that's where we're getting all of the emergence of these new pathogens, and that's where we have to focus a serious effort into the future. Thank you very much for listening. I hope I haven't bored you all with that. I'm going to go back now to stop sharing my screen, and maybe one or two of you have some questions for me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan, for this very comprehensive talk, and you have covered a number of points which are challenges not only for the competent authority but also for the industry and the food production and processing sector. So I think they've been very useful for all the audience. Of course, we have people from academia, we have people from food industry, we have people from FSSAI, and number of other agencies listening to this. So I think you have messages for all the stakeholders. And one important point you made, which is good for the food industry, that of course the conclusion that COVID-19 is not foodborne. So that is an important message for the food industry. But of course there are challenges which the processing industry has to face, and the examples of these meat processing factories is a real challenge when we open up. Now, how do we open up? Probably this is something we need to consider. And of course, many countries are now vaccinating. Now, is there any guidance regarding vaccination or testing for processing workers before they go to they get back to work, or is there any guidance on that?
What can I say? There is some guidance, certainly from the point of view of testing workers. PCR testing is key. I mean, say that's the definitive way to test food workers, but you don't get a result until maybe 1 or 2 days from PCR testing. So really, it's lateral flow tests which can give you an answer in 15 minutes. And this is where you're testing antibodies. Now, the correlation between lateral flow testing and PCR testing is still under debate, if you like to call it. But certainly, lateral flow testing for the food industry, I would recommend as a risk management strategy, because you will pick people up who are infectious. You probably will miss people who are at the early stages of infection. The asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic people, you probably won't pick up with the lateral flow testing because you'd need a high level of antibodies, but certainly people who are, quite infectious, you will pick them up with a lateral flow test. So as a risk management tool, testing, food workers probably 2 or 3 times a week, I think would be valuable. Certainly, that would be my recommendation. And then, of course, PCR testing being the definitive test, if you can, but it's expensive and it takes a little bit longer. And in terms of opening up, certainly for opening up things like catering establishment, restaurants, and so on, really the key here is to ensure that you have good ventilation, that you have some form of air handling system, whether you put HEPA filters into your air handling system or your air conditioning, whether you put something like UV lights into your air conditioning system. But that is really key to ensure that you have a good exchange of air, because when you get the build up, from results that we've conducted at University College Dublin, we can see what's going on in these food premises, that you do have a build up of aerosols over the, an 8-hour working period. We know aerosols can, contain SARS-CoV-2. And if you look back at the SARS-CoV-1 back a number of years, where you look at how people got infected in restaurants and so on, it was because of poor air handling or poor air conditioning systems. So that's why we're opening up at the present moment to say, yes, we all can eat out. So eating outside the restaurant is now what governments are suggesting until everybody gets vaccinated. And the vaccination, as you know, is taking, is very slow. Producing sufficient quantities and rolling out of a vaccination program is not going as quickly as it should. But having said that, I think to be in the position where we have vaccines now, is extraordinary. Yes, vaccination, I think, will get us out of the pandemic, but until then, we still have to ensure that we do take measures, and social distancing, wearing face masks and so on is really key.
Thank you. And also a question from our Vice Chancellor. So he's saying, should we not concentrate on improving the quality of food in terms of nutrients? And what is the recommendation for?
Yeah, that is also key. Look, there is a movement for nutrition sensitive agriculture, and this is where you're looking at greater nutritional quality of crops coming out of the fields, and if you have healthy soils, where the soil provides the nutrients for the crops. So yes, that is so important. I would agree that we need nutritious foods. I don't think we need food. We need healthy foods, nutritious foods in sufficient quantities to ensure people remain healthy. But I think safety and nutrition will go hand in hand. If the food is unsafe, it's certainly it's not a sustainable food supply if the food is safe. So I say it has to be safe, number one. I've often thought of, when you look at safety as an ingredient in the food, safety is the ingredient in the food that allows you to put it on the market. Quality is the ingredient that allows you to make money. So a higher quality food, you can get a better price for. And certainly when it comes to nutritional quality, it really is key. Say foods that lack micronutrients and so on. I think it's more, when it comes to nutrition, it's more the balanced diet that's important. But certainly, I think the focus on food safety is paramount, because an unsafe food supply will make people sick. When people become sick with diarrhea and so on, they won't be absorbing nutrients. It doesn't matter how nutritious the food is, it will still be excreted without being absorbed and so on. So it really is fundamental for public health that the food must be safe.
Yeah, and one more question, as you mentioned regarding e-commerce, and most people are going in for online ordering. So that means I think mostly people are getting ready-to-eat foods and things like that. And you also mentioned about the challenges in terms of inspections and things like that. So how to balance this, of course, where you are more exposed to ready-to-eat foods, but reduced inspection, how to improve safety in this context?
Yeah, well, look, e-commerce is posing a real problem for food control authorities because, food inspectors are not trained to enforce regulations associated with e-commerce. Our regulations, they rely upon having food premises, a fixed food premises. Food premises would be approved, they would be registered, or they'd be licensed by the food control authorities. But what happens when you have an online platform selling food, and they will be sourcing food from someplace and selling it to the consumer, but the if you like to call it, the business is the online platform, and they are food businesses. Now, a lot of those online platforms are not registered with the competent authorities as food businesses, so it's very difficult to control them. And what happens when some of these online platforms are not in the country? That you're sourcing foods or food ingredients, if you're a food processor, from overseas through this online platform. Who controls them? So there's a whole new, if you like to call it, area of work for the food control authorities, whereby they have to identify essentially, on the trusted suppliers who are supplying foods online. With the pandemic, people have seen the business opportunity, maybe to set up, a food supply ready to eat food from your own kitchen. And that's happened in a number of cases. Now, from a domestic kitchen, they would not be, applying the same standards as you would find in a registered or an approved restaurant. So you have all of these different activities going on at the present moment, and everything has just sprung up overnight. I don't know in India if you're familiar with the term a dark kitchen. And a dark kitchen is a kitchen that just supplies online foods, and nobody has any idea where that kitchen is. And as I say, you're not buying foods from the kitchen, you're buying foods from the web platform or the online platform, and they're being supplied by, and somebody is going along delivering that food to you. So it's a whole new area, if you like to call it, of commerce or of supplying foods, and it's something we're only getting to grips with. So I think we've got a lot to learn, and we're catching up with what's going on in the industry, rather than being ahead of the curve.
Thank you very much for addressing these questions. Of course, there will be some more which we will send to you later. And now, of course, we are approaching the time. So I'd like to thank you for such an extensive lecture covering all the latest developments which are important for the governments, for the food industry, and for the consumers. So it has been a great feast of information for all of us. Thank you very much.
Look, it's been a great pleasure, and thank you again for inviting me and giving the opportunity to present some of these ideas. And it's really been a pleasure to meet with yourself and Indrani again. So let's continue our collaboration.
Thank you. I don't know whether Vice Chancellor wants to say anything. Are you there?
I think Vice Chancellor, you're muted again.
No.
Sir, you're muted, sir.
I should congratulate you for organizing this wonderful talk by Alan. Really, we have been benefited by this talk. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being part of this celebration. Thank you very much, and we hope we'll be able to meet after this pandemic in our campus. It's my invitation to you to come to Mangalore, have our Mangalore fish delicacies in Mangalore. I think you'll like it. So on this occasion, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that invitation. I've been lucky enough to have two vaccinations from the BioNTech mRNA vaccine. So hopefully I'll have some immunity, and hopefully we'll get back to some form of normality in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank all the participants who have registered and listened to this talk. And I would like to thank our IT department who organized the connection from this talk to the YouTube. So, and thanks to all of you. Thanks, Alan, and hope to see you in Mangalore. So the Vice Chancellor has already extended his invitation to you. And I think the last time you were in Mangalore was in 2010 for our FAO workshop, where we chaired the expert meeting on salmonella. So now it's due. So it's more than a decade you came. So hope we can have you in Mangalore. Thank you very much. And thanks.
I look forward.
Thank you.
Okay, listen, cheerio, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.